Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Deep Dive Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. And RJ, after many weeks of not talking about Kraken wins, boy, are we getting spoiled right now talking about Kraken wins, or at least in the case of last night against Vancouver, at least another point in the standings, some forward momentum for a Kraken team. Maybe they are, in fact, rising from the deep, if maybe just a little bit.
Well, yeah, you had to get to the deep in order to rise from the deep. This fits the branding and the marketing and everything. And of course, with the jerseys last night, you got to stay in the abyss. You can't get the win. That's not very abyss-like.
No.
But anyway, 4 wins out of the last 5, and it's a very different feel around this Kraken team right now.
Yeah. Bioluminescence does not play when you're at surface level. You know what I mean? Certainly not going to
Not
play
at
if you're
all.
above the water level. No, you have to be down there to showcase what you've got going on. But yeah, no, this Kraken team is, well, and this will be the question for later. Are they playing well, or is it their opponents are not playing well, and all of the stuff around that? You gave everybody a taste last night on Postgame Live, just how, not just for you and me, but also for Lane Lambert, the results don't ever seem to match the effort level and how well the Kraken are playing. And we're going to dive into that. You've got some good graphs to show off that kind of display that. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. We're also going to get into, look, Kraken right now kind of facing a decision about which direction to go with the rest of this season. Do you make the push for the playoffs, or do you try to get top 3 lottery odds in a year where that's never been easier? It's never been easier to make the playoffs either. And I know you definitely have a lot of thoughts on that topic, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. And we've, of course, got to talk about Philip Grubauer. Best Kraken goaltender? Is the crease his? Should it be his? We got to talk about that. And then, of course, the big news of today, where we avoided the deep dive curse this is like the second or third time this season. Maybe our luck's starting to change with the deep dive curse.
I mean, just like the Kraken, our luck is starting to turn around after maybe a few that we've had some curses recently. I think we're on the right end of it now.
Yeah, I'd say so. So we'll get to that news and share with everybody in just a moment. Of course, first, we've got to thank our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor, for sponsoring the podcast, as he does each and every week, RJ. We are just about over with the holiday season. We've made it through unscathed so far. I do want to remind everybody that, New Year's Eve, there's going to be lots of drinking and stuff. Don't go out there and drive if you've gone to a New Year's Eve party and you've drinking. If on the road at all New Year's night, just be careful out there. I know it can be a sketchy time for everybody. Not only that, everybody's staying up late and you're tired. Forget about just the drinking. You're also driving tired. So don't do that if you can avoid it. But RJ, getting through the holiday season, it's another year in which I've still not seen the movie Home Alone, which
What?
feels insane. I know.
Dylan, we need to watch this together.
I know. Everybody keeps telling me that, and then you know what? Nobody ever puts it on when I'm there. So just saying. Anyway, I'm not even opposed to watching it. But it's just one of those things where I feel like I've seen the movie because I've seen Macaulay Culkin, if we're going to use his government name, his new government name. I've seen him just destroy these 2 individuals trying to break into his house so many times. YouTube clips worked into other things, like it's just so ubiquitous come the holiday season that I feel like I've seen the movie without ever actually having seen the movie. But boy, do you think like Rico just watches that movie on repeat every holiday season? Because that feels like a personal injury attorney's like just dream movie scenario, outside of the fact that they are essentially committing a crime. So I don't know that they can potentially sue a 7 or 8-year-old child.
Yeah, I think you need the Home Alone sequel where it's some kind of open place of business, maybe, and then the child creates all these traps, and then the wet bandits are your dream client, I think. But it's a great movie, Dylan. We need to watch it together. I mean, I understand how you feel that way about it, because that's kind of how I felt about Star Wars.
Mhm.
Like I hadn't seen the movie, but like I had seen it. I'd seen all the clips. I know what happens, all that sort of thing. But as you know, each movie kind of has a rhythm of its own, right? If you get into it and watch the whole thing. So, all right, next time you're over, I know what I'm putting on the TV, Christmas or not.
Yeah, no, I feel like it work any time of year. I'm a big Chris Columbus fan, the director, not the explorer. Gotta preface that the writer director. Um, but but yeah, yeah, I'd be down for that for sure. Like I said, I'm not opposed to it. Just never quite lined up just right. I don't know. Is there a thing like even if somebody's trying to break into your house, you can't like cross a certain threshold? I don't know. He's
Oh,
in
there's
Chicago, right?
that's very much a thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of relevant law about that. So it's debated quite a bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, so, well, maybe we'll have to do a watch along with Rico. He can explain everything
There we
to
go.
us from a legal
Exactly.
perspective. But definitely want to thank Law Offices of Rico Testador for sponsoring the podcast. As always, let me pull up my ad read there. While we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Now, RJ, just moments before we started recording, we got the information that Yanni Newman has been reassigned to Coachella Valley. Talked about it a little bit yesterday on Postgame Live. That look, if Yanni Newman's going to continue to be a healthy scratch for Lane Lambert and on this Kraken team, might because he needs to work on his play away from the puck, back checking, all of those kinds of things. You might as well send him down to Coachella Valley, let him get those reps. He's not going to learn that stuff sitting on the bench. He's just not. Get him in Coachella Valley with the caveat of tell him exactly what he needs to work on, and then tell the CV staff, tell Coach Laxdal's staff exactly what you want him working on so that you don't run into this problem in the future if you need to call him up later this season or come next season. I think that's an important aspect of this, and I'm sure that that is part of this, reassignment for him going back down to Coachella Valley. But yeah, kind of crazy timing after I was just talking about this last night.
Yeah, well, I think it's at the point where something needed to happen. He was pretty consistently a scratch. As long as there were really healthy veterans to put in the lineup over him, the team has elected to do so. And even when he has been in the lineup, he's been getting barely any minutes. He's averaging like 10 something on the season. And that's just not the way that a player is going to develop. So this is a necessary change. He doesn't require waivers or anything. So you can just send him up and back and it's no problem. But yeah, I mean, I think this goes along with the team's decision to lean on the veterans and maybe have some of the younger players take a backseat in terms of opportunity. Like you said, you're not going to develop that way. He's probably too good for the AHL, and you're right. That's where I would caution against. I think there's going to be a temptation to just go light it up because he very much can. I mean,
Mhm.
he could potentially even be in a small stint, like a goal per game player or near that at the AHL level. He is that good, but you got to not do that. You got to work on the specific things that you need to fix so that when you get to the NHL level, it doesn't happen again. But at least now he gets to play. Like he's going to
Yeah.
learn. Well,
Uh,
even if he does just go light it up, he's going to gain more from that because he's playing than he would being in the press box at the NHL level.
yeah, for sure. At game reps, there's just no substitution for it, regardless of what level you're playing at. I mean, if he was going to go play with a bunch of 10-year-olds, there probably wouldn't be a lot of benefit. But certainly against men in any league in the world, there's going to be some benefit for him. And so, yeah, I think that there is going to be some positives there. And I do think like just him having the message from Lane Lambert and the rest of the staff with the Kraken all season long. He has been working on things in practice. He's been trying to focus on things during the limited game action he's gotten so far this season. And so I'm sure that those kind of habits that he's been working on building will be present in his game as he goes and joins the Firebirds down in Coachella Valley. And look, this was also a symptom of the Kraken are starting to get a little healthier, right? Berkeley Catton's back, Jared McCann's back, two players that can play on the left side. Yanni Newman kind of over on the right side, but that hasn't been as decimated by injury so far this season. But yeah, I think that there just didn't really seem to be a lot of room for him, especially with Jacob Melanson coming into the lineup as well. Like, I do think that this is also a signal that, hey, they've kind of made their choice on which type of player they want in that kind of bottom six role. And they're going to keep Melanson over Yanni Newman, at least here in the short term. Jaden Schwartz comes back, something like that. Melanson might then find himself on the outs. But it sure seems like Lane Lambert's sending a message on the style and type of player he wants in the lineup right now.
Yeah, and I'll give this to Lambert. I think it is a better fit for the way that this
Mhm.
team wants to play, the low scoring, grinded out type of hockey. I think Melanson is going to give you a little bit more of a well rounded game, especially in the bottom six, than what Yanni Newman could give you. I mean, that's was one of our concerns about just this whole style of hockey and the Lane Lambert way and everything is how are the young offensively gifted players going to fit into it? And I think the answer so far has been not very well. But for the time being, they're playing this way. And so at least Newman can go to a Firebirds team where I think he'll have more of a chance to use that offensive freedom and creativity and that shot.
Yes,
I bet
especially
he'll be
that
getting
shot.
power play time down in CV.
I was just gonna say, does he immediately become their like power play go-to guy, or do you think it takes a game?
Yeah, I guess that's the longest it would take, right?
Yeah, probably. So that is the situation and the latest development from the Kraken organization from the news that we got this morning. The next thing that we want to talk about is, of course, in the crease, RJ, where look, it's not like Joey Decord has been bad this year by any means. Joey Decord is still having a fantastic season, but Philip Grubauer is outshining him right now and has been for the last couple weeks. And so, my very reasonable and not full of hyperbole question to you, RJ, is this Philip Grubauer's crease? And Joey Decord is just keeping it warm during the starts Grubauer can't have.
Well, I'd say no, that's not the case. Well, the thing is, they also have so many back to backs. I think what, like four straight sets of back to backs,
Yeah.
which really means there's no real decision. Each goalie is playing one of them. So we haven't seen Lane Lambert have to kind of tip his hand or favor one goalie at all. And so I would say no, it's not Philip Grubauer's crease, but maybe it should be, at least in the short term. I'm a big believer in riding the hot hand when it comes to goaltending, and I'm consistent on this. This is
Yep.
why I was saying you cannot put Philip Grubauer in net when he was playing as poorly as he was. I don't care about the contract. Put somebody else in there. And so I'm going to be consistent here again. Philip Grubauer has been the better of your two goalies. We can dive into the stats, but he leads in just about every category in
Mhm.
terms of the Kraken. And when it comes to my favorite, goals saved above expected, and you count that per game, I mean, he's top five in the NHL. He's playing as well as any goalie in the National Hockey League right now. And you have to just get over the level of surprise that is, given the last few seasons he's had. And I think you need to ride the hot hand, and he should get the preference for starts once it stops being back to backs, at least until he stops playing this way.
Right, I'm with you. I think that that's the appropriate way to handle this situation. I know we've talked about it in the past, largely around Philip Grubauer because he's been the guy who's maybe been more vocal about it, not in a negative way, just as far as explaining maybe the thought process of what a goaltender goes through when they're not starting versus when they're starting, and the ability to get into a rhythm and all of that kind of stuff. But I do think that yeah, if it's always been kind of like and any rotation type thing in sports, right? Like whether you're talking about an NBA or you're talking about running backs in the football in football, or you're talking about at times like different batters or even pitchers in MLB. If somebody's just feeling it and they're in the groove, like as a coach, you have to acknowledge that and you have to take advantage of it when it's there. And hockey is certainly no different. Goaltending is arguably the biggest example of that. And I think that Lane Lambert doesn't seem too shy. Like there was a little bit at the start. It felt like Grubauer was playing well. Joey looked like maybe he was not totally burned out, but like maybe something was going on there. And they were still going with Joey through the early stretches of that losing stretch that the Kraken had, and then they went ahead and switched it to Grubauer, and Grubauer's just been able to play more close games, pick up some wins, and certainly just look more solid. And I want to talk about why that is because I do think that Philip Grubauer has made an adjustment to his goaltending style and at least his mentality out there on the ice, and that's why we're getting the result that we're getting from him because to me, RJ, Philip Grubauer looks so much more aggressive in his crease. We're seeing him play up at the top of his crease so much more. He's coming out to challenge shooters. He's not worried so much about backdoor plays or situations around the rebound. He's just focused on making that initial save. And then if something happens after that, it happens. And I think that that's just a better way to play when you're a smaller goaltender, right? Is to be aggressive and come out. These last couple seasons, you can tell that his confidence hasn't always been there at times. And he's played extremely deep in his crease. And we've seen so many goals go in because he was deep in his crease, just gave him nowhere to go, gave him no room to challenge shooters, did not allow him to properly, take advantage of his strengths and play the angles all the time because the post is in the way or he's just so far back there that you can see the big gap over his shoulder. This right now, the way he's playing, he's just not allowing any of those things to happen. And it just feels like he has a completely different mentality, really, than any Philip Grubauer that we've seen the last 5 years.
Well, I think one of the big differences is that there's a trust there that the teammates in front of him are going to take away things like those backdoor
Mhm.
plays, like those rebounds that end up in net front. Those things that as a goalie, when the defense is not consistently taking those away, you do have to have that in the back of your mind. If I get aggressive here, is there going to be somebody left wide open on the doorstep there behind me that I have to worry about and I have to try and get in the way of? And that's something that I think, Joey Decord was really good at taking care of last year when the Kraken would leave that open, because he does think about those things and he's able to kind of multitask there. And he's a bigger goalie, so it helps him to be able to stay, he doesn't stay deep in his net, but like to try and focus on both things.
Yeah.
But with Grubauer, I just think he can't afford to do that. But he hasn't had to worry about those things being open because the team has been playing so solid defensively in front of him. And so it just works together really well where he can be aggressive and rarely gets burned on it. So I've been impressed with that. Even simple things just like the coordination, just shots that he can see clearly, that come from distance, that in the past he wasn't stopping. He is stopping now. And that's kind of what a goalie should do. But it's nice to see he has that back, because all it takes is one or two of those where you're like, man, I needed to stop that. And it can kind of spiral mentally, I think, especially if you're not in a rhythm where you have a chance, okay, I'm playing in a couple days, I can make up for it.
Right. No, it's true. I also think that, yeah, he has the confidence in the D. This is a very different defensive structure than anything he's played behind the Kraken before, under whether it was Dave Hackstall or under Dan Bylsma last season. This Lane Lambert system is just different and it is more defensively focused. And yeah, and there is going to be some more support there for the goaltenders. And I think that it's been good for Philip Grubauer to be in a system like this. I also think the angles and where the shots are coming from just suit his style of goaltending better than what he was having to deal with last season. I think that that's been a big part of this. And then also, there was a goaltending coach change, right? This offseason. And I do think that, some of this is Grubauer, some of this is the goalie change, some of it is the defensive system. And it's one of those things where I don't know that it was any one thing specifically that has meant that Grubauer has kind of really rebounded this season and is playing some fantastic hockey right now. But I think it's one of those things where all of those things add up and then allow him to go out there and put up the, top 5 numbers that he's putting up right now.
Yeah, and on the goalie change, I think this is interesting because you go back to when they made that change in the offseason. And Dylan, what did we say about it? We said that we figured a lot of it was based on Philip Grubauer and Zulianello
Yeah.
being able to work with him in CV and get his game back to where it needed to be. And we figured that was maybe one of the things the team was prioritizing. I know we said we kind of hoped they weren't prioritizing that, maybe say over the progress that Steve Briere had made
Mhm.
with Joey, even though Zulianello had worked with both of them and everything. But seems like it's certainly paid off on the Grubauer front. I mean, you could then have your questions about Joey and the level of play there, and has that been a detriment, the goalie change? But for Grubauer, it's absolutely working.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think I'm wondering a little bit with Joey if he's still maybe banged up a tiny bit.
He's the kind of guy who would play through something, that he was been dealing with. Again, we, don't know anything for sure. We can't like see anything
Yeah.
obvious in the room or anything, but he was injured at some point
Mhm.
this season. It's been 2 years in a row now that he's dealt with an injury at some point. He's played a lot of games. It wouldn't be the most surprising thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he's playing through something and yeah, it's not bad, but it's maybe just that little bit enough that you can't play at 100%. So you're stuck playing at like 90, 95%. But also, yeah, I wonder if some of it's the goaltending coach change and the defensive system change, right? Joey likes being a little bit more of an acrobatic goaltender back there. He likes having the lateral movements and stuff like that. And I do think there's been less of that behind this Lane Lambert system there's just a lot more of staying square to the shooter, and for a more calculated goaltender like Philip Grubauer, that is definitely to his benefit. So that's the situation there in net. Bottom line though, both goalies are playing well. Like again, nothing wrong with Joey this year, really.
No, he
It's
hasn't been
just
bad
it's
for
just
sure.
he's
I
getting
mean,
outplayed by Philip Grubauer.
yeah, I mean, I talked about Grubauer on the goals saved above expected being 12th in the NHL, despite playing like half the games of the guys in front of him for a counting stat. And then Joey, he's still 23rd. That still ranks among starters. He's still right there. He saved almost 11 more goals above expected, than he would have been expected to based on the shot quality he faced. So that's certainly not bad either.
Yeah, no, and that means he's probably pretty high up there on the per game basis, just like Grubauer. So, good stuff there on the goaltending front. Now, though, to do our deep dive, right? The reason that the podcast is named this, and look at the big picture for the Kraken because they went on that winning streak through California. RJ, they pick up all the wins against all the California teams. Some of those games look better than others, but the bottom line is you got 6 points out of it. You come back home, you pick up a win against the Flyers, good game there. Get a point against Vancouver last night. This is a team that is starting to get on a roll. They're right back in the wild card conversation now. They're technically, if you look at the standings right now, behind the Sharks there. But if you look at points percentage, they are just ever so barely better than San Jose for that second wild card spot from points percentage standpoint. So if the rest of the season was to play out the way all of these teams have been playing, the Kraken would make the playoffs right now as the second wild card team. They're right back there, RJ, after what was a horrible November, early December run. How do we feel about this? Because it felt like everybody in the fan base was just kind of starting to accept that this was not the season that everybody was hoping for, wanting, all of that kind of stuff. And we were starting to like transition into, okay, let's look at the draft prospects, let's look at the situation there. There's nobody that's really that bad right now in the NHL, so like getting top 3 lottery odds isn't necessarily going to be that difficult for the Kraken, all of that stuff. But then the Kraken go out there and win a bunch of games, and now we're talking about the wild card spot again. And I don't know about you, but it feels a little whiplashy, just how fast this all changed. Why can't this team just be normal? Why do they have to do these extreme streaks on us, RJ?
I don't know, and I will get to this in a little bit. How this team is just maddening to me, but when we look at the big picture and where the Kraken are in the standings, I think they're part of a larger story around the NHL and this odd phenomenon that's going on. Because normally, when you lose 10 out of 11 games in the month of December, that's it. You're done. You're done. It's clearly time to move on and look forward at maybe next season, because you've got no chance at the playoffs. This year is different than any other year, certainly in the cap era, probably going back even further than that, because the situation around the league, and it's been expressed so many different ways, but like that the Kraken are in a wild card spot by points percentage. They're like right there in the West, and yet they would be last place in the Eastern Conference. One conference is running laps around the other. And so as a result, the bar to make the playoffs in the Western Conference is the lowest that it has ever been in the salary cap era. The Kraken are on an 86-point pace, and they are on pace to make the playoffs. Now, those of you who remember season 2, that Kraken team, they made the playoffs as a wild card team. They were a 100-point team. They had 100 points. The line for the playoffs, Winnipeg, as the last wild card, was 95 points. Calgary was out with 93 points. Last year, look at the Calgary Flames. They had 96 points, 10 more than the Kraken are projected to get. They missed the playoffs. That's where the line kind of usually is. The line is as low as it's ever been. The Kraken, if they made the playoffs, would be the worst playoff team in the salary cap era. And then you go back before that and there were ties. And so the point thing's a little weird. But really, this is unprecedented. And it's something we identified early in the season, but it has certainly continued. You look around the league any given night, and those of you who like scoreboard watching, you watch all the teams the Kraken are competing with. They all lose in regulation pretty much every single night. For the last 2 weeks, the Kraken have gotten all of the scoreboard help they could possibly ask for. and nobody is moving ahead in this race. So that is as easy as as it will ever be. On the flip side, things are so bunched up that the bottom of the league is actually as high as it will ever be. The last place team in the NHL by pace, Chicago Blackhawks, they're on a 73-point pace. That would be the most points by a last place team in the NHL ever in NHL history. And so it has never been easier to get top lottery odds. It's never been easier to make the playoffs in the West. And so nobody is really out of it from either perspective. If you are one of those teams that's bunched up there, you are very much in it for the top lottery odds. You are very much in it for a playoff spot. It doesn't, you're not out of it either way. And so that's why my main point here is I think with the unprecedented nature of the standings this year, the Kraken need to either make the playoffs or get top three lottery odds. Both options are as easy as they will ever be. And really, I don't care which it is. If you press me, maybe I'll give an opinion, but I don't really care which it is if they get one of those done. But finishing the season with neither of those results has to be viewed as a serious failure for this organization because both are so attainable relative to any other year.
Yeah. No, did an incredible job running through everything there and setting it up. It is, as you said, like, right, this incredibly unique scenario that we have not seen in the NHL. You're talking about basically what, a 13-point difference in the standings between dead last versus making the playoffs. That's yeah, there's certainly never been a situation that's felt like that in the National Hockey League, and for it to all be happening around the Kraken here is, it's interesting. I think that I'm with you. They have to pick one of those two directions, and you have to go with it. You need to make the playoffs at some point. You need to show that this organization is serious about winning, that it is capable of winning. I think that that's something that's important when you're looking around the league as, say, a free agent, somebody who has to submit a no trade list come the off season, right? I think that there are a lot of benefits to making the playoffs beyond just fans get to experience another playoff run, and it's really exciting for everybody on our end. We get to cover the playoffs again. It's felt like forever.
Revenue
There's
for
just
ownership.
right. There's like a level of legitimacy that being a playoff team in the NHL just gives your organization that the Kraken have really, really lost over these last couple seasons. And so I think that it would be important for them to make the playoffs from that perspective. On the flip side, if you are able to attain a high lottery pick this year and you're able to pick top three, let's say, maybe this year top four, you're going to be able to select a player that in a very short amount of time could conceivably become your best player, right? Like literally like a year or two's time, depending on who it is, could become the best player in franchise history. And that's something that the Kraken have needed. We've all talked about this so many times. The Kraken, even if you just look at the playoff teams, the Kraken would be the one team that does not have a star player, that doesn't have one individual kind of leading the charge for them and getting them to the postseason. And as much as it feels like that should be the non-stable and sustainable way of making a postseason run is to rely on one guy to help get you there. The realities in the National Hockey League is that it is a star-driven league, and that is the sustainable path to making the postseason is to have, certainly if you want to be a cup contender, 2 or 3 star level guys, but you need at least one of them to get you in that conversation. And I think San Jose is a good example of this with Macklin Celebrini right now, player who's absolutely playing out of his mind, looks like a legitimate superstar, already starting to look like a top 10 player in the league. And he's just 19 years old. And look, the Sharks are as bad as the Kraken are analytics wise, but they are there because Macklin Celebrini is averaging an assist per game right now. He is just playing out of his mind and he is dragging that team there. And so it's one of those things where I think long term, you could build up the legitimacy of your franchise. All of those things that a playoff berth would potentially bring to you, you can build those in a much more sustainable long-term way if you were to go ahead and take advantage of not needing to be terrible to get a top lottery pick this year. And so for that reason, like if you press me, I'm going to say like the Kraken should choose the more sustainable option and in theory end up in that spot. Obviously, we act like this is a choice that they can make. We know that Lane Lambert and the players and the organization would never choose to tank and bottom out like that. It's only a kind of a choice that Jason Botterill as general manager could make by trading away everybody. I don't think that he's really going to have the ability to do that though if they're in a playoff spot.
No, probably not. Although, I mean, David Pagnotta did report the other day that even if they do hang around in the wild card race, that Botterill might be willing to sell a veteran or two, which that was an encouraging report to me. And so we'll see how much truth that actually has to it. You got to take all that stuff with a grain of salt. But I just don't know that given whatever pressure from ownership. Look, the fact that they hired Lane Lambert, I think, already speaks to the fact that they're feeling some pressure to win right away and to turn things around in the short term. Otherwise, keep Dan Bilesma and just go through more of a rebuild. So I don't know that he's going to feel like he's able to do that. And it's not even just like a Macklin Celebrini. You look at, say the New York Islanders who kind of tore things down last season. You get the top pick in a Matthew Schaefer, and all of a sudden, right now, just the very next season, you got 46 points in 39 games. That would be good enough for first place in the Pacific Division right now. By the way, having a top pick can really help turn things around, even if it's not a franchise center. And some say maybe Keaton Verhoff could be a defenseman, maybe not on that level, but very good. So the possibility is there. But I have a question for you, Dylan, because I've made it pretty clear what I think as far as just what the expectations need to be. And for me, I'll go into detail a little bit more. When I say they need to either make the playoffs or have top 3 lottery odds, or else it's a serious failure, I mean that. There's no close. There's no, oh, you missed the playoffs by a couple points. You're playing meaningful games. Because we talked about this early on in the season or before the season, right? We were like, well, if they're playing meaningful games in March and April, you could look at that as success, as real progress that the team has made. I think for me, at least, that's out the window because playing meaningful games late in the season, who's going to be doing that? Everybody, because it's so close and bunched up. That's the same as saying we have zero expectations. That's the same as saying our expectations is that we are a National Hockey League team that plays out its full schedule. And if we can do that, we've succeeded this year. No, none of that. The bar is so low. I think they either need to make it or it's a failure if they're going in that upward direction. Like, has that changed for you, or are you still willing to kind of give them some grace there?
Uh, How obtainable it is certainly makes it feel different. I would say the thing for me that's made me kind of come off of that a little bit and change it up is the fact that the young guys aren't really taking steps forward.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's the thing. I would be okay with you playing tough and missing out on the playoffs by a little bit and not getting a high draft pick because Matty Beniers, Shane Wright, Berkeley Cat, and Yanni Newman, all those guys were really taking great strides forward. And right now, I think only one of those guys is really making strides and working on things and is getting better as a player, and that's Berkeley Catton, who has done a phenomenal job this season of getting better. The production is not there, but it's there if you watch the games, right? He is passing the eye test. He is getting better. The production will come at some point. I know it's kind of rough just to see him at the 5 assists for a long time, like he is right now, but he's playing and he's trying to do things that are going to make him, a great player for the Kraken in the future. But that for me is the thing that's changed. It's the fact that Matty Beniers is barely a half a point per game player. He only has 4 goals on the season. We talked last night about him becoming more and more of a playmaker this season, relying on how hot Jordan Eberle has been and how, Matty Beniers is a large part of that and what Jordan Eberle's been able to do here in the short term anyway, and setting up Capo Caco now that he's back, and Jared McCann earlier on in the season. But still, half a point per game and 4 goals from your supposed franchise center. I know he's not an offensive guy. He was never supposed to be a big offensive guy. You still need a little bit more than that, right? And certainly for a guy who's in his 4th full regular season, you were hoping to see him kind of take that step. And then there's, of course, Shane Wright, who has 14 points through 37 games. right now, well below half a point per game as a player. Huge amount of regression this season from Shane Wright. That was not at all the direction that he needed to be moving in and progressing in as a top 5 pick. That to me makes me feel that yes, you either need to make the playoffs for sure, or you need to pick high in the draft and try to get somebody who can potentially replace what Matty Beniers and Shane Wright were supposed to be for this organization, because they're just not becoming that. And like, it's one of those things. I know it's with young players that at any given time things can click and fall into place for them and they could start performing, but every season that goes by that these guys are not turning into that player for the Seattle Kraken, the odds of that happening drop precipitously. And I've talked about it in the past. There's only a handful of examples of players who have been top 5 picks, who have turned things around and gone on to become point per game players and true franchise players after their age 22 season. And that list is almost exclusively players who changed organizations and then were able to do that. You're talking about Dylan Stromes, and you're talking about Sam Reinhart's and all these guys who were not able to hit that next level until they changed organizations. So from a Kraken perspective, that doesn't help you, right? That doesn't provide a lot of hope, that it means that that can really happen for your young guys. So I think for me, that's the situation that has changed for this group. Was the expectation was, look, if Shane is progressing and Maddie's progressing, and that's why the team is close, but they didn't quite make the playoffs yet. It's like, okay, it's Berkeley Catton's first year, Shane's second full season. That there's a wiggle room there, but there's hope and there's potential, and that's still something you can build off of moving forward if you miss the playoffs. Right now, that would not be the case. If you miss the playoffs right now, it's because your veteran players who are almost all UFAs were not good enough, and the young guys didn't step up at all. And that to me is extremely worrying. And that is what makes that scenario for me the true doomsday scenario and the worst case scenario for the Kraken.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and I think that's a great point about the young players. It has to be acknowledged. This team has chosen to lean on its veterans time and time again. They've done it
Because
again
they've
this
played
season.
better.
And they have played better. Absolutely. That's the thing. You probably are sacrificing some wins if you go to the young players, because they're going to make mistakes early on. That's what a whole transition year is. That's what that looks like. And the team has clearly not chosen that path. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like, this is not the path the team has taken. And I think it would take something like a massive losing streak to get them to maybe change their mind. And then they even had that. And because everybody else around them has lost, they're still not going to make that call. I just, given the way the standings are, I cannot imagine this team ever really embracing a transition year this season. And already they've burned about half the season anyway. We're approaching the halfway mark. So, it's just not really in the cards. So they've kind of gone all in, I think, on the chasing the upward path of trying to make the playoffs this year. And I think that's ultimately how we have to judge them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is the expectation that the organization has set. I know that's something that you've always kind of asked for of the organization, is just give us a concrete, this is what we want.
Well, they'll still never do it with words. They'll never actually
Yeah, no, they have
communicate
not
it.
done it with words, but actions speak louder than words, and certainly all the actions they've taken from the off season on through today, with Yanni Newman going down to Coachella Valley, has signaled that they are choosing the direction of trying to make the playoffs this season.
Yeah. So that's how we're going to judge you. If you want us to judge you differently, you can say things. You can let us know that maybe
Yes.
that's not the plan. But until then, that's kind of what we are left to assume for this team. And I mean, I've been saying it forever. Pick a direction. It feels like they kind of have a little bit,
Mhm.
but yeah, ultimately pick a direction. But it's hard for me also because I don't. If you were to tell me, okay, they need to pick a direction, like what should they do at this point? I still don't fully know what to tell them because yeah, they've been the losing streak, the winning streak. I would say okay, just do the things you've been doing on your winning streak, but I don't know that I can really tell them that solidly. Like if we now go into how they're playing, I don't know what advice to really give them.
Right, and, you sent me this chart that I'm looking at right now, and I'll throw it up on the video version of the pod in the edit, and it is a wild chart. It matches a lot of what we've been seeing, and a lot of what Lane Lambert's been saying as far as results not matching how his group is playing. And I think that that's pretty fair to say. I mean, last night was a great example of that. They solidly outplay the Canucks, and you walk out of there with a loss in the shootout, and it doesn't matter. This chart from Hockey Viz certainly backs that up, and I'll let you kind of walk everybody through it.
Yeah. So, Dylan, another story for this. I needed to talk about this chart because it is just ridiculous what you see on this chart. And I think it helps explain why I'm maybe losing my sanity a little bit with this team. Because, Dylan, this team is maddening. I do not know how I can do my job anymore with this team. Because look, my job is to analyze this team. That's what my job is on this podcast covering this team. I want to analyze this team and communicate to everybody, why things are working or why they're not working. And in the past, it's at least made sense. It's been frustrating because the results have been inconsistent and all that sort of thing. But in the past, it's at least made sense. This year's Kraken team defies all logic. The better they play, the worse results they get. And the worse they play, the better results they get. And so I want to direct everybody to this chart. It's from hockeyviz.com. A great chart, and I think explains this phenomenon perfectly. So take a look at this smooth 5-on-5 expected goals per 60, that middle chart here. I'm not sure how Dylan's going to put it up on the podcast.
I'll try to make that chart full screen. Yeah.
Okay, so make that the prominent one, but take a look at this. And so it's a timeline. It starts at the start of the season in October, and it goes all the way up to the present. So take a look at that. So this is 5-on-5 expected goals per 60. So the black is expected goals for, the red is expected goals against. Now see the gap between those two lines? There's a gap and it's highlighted in either color. So when that's a red gap, that's bad. You are getting outchanced. The other team is getting more shot quality than you. And the bigger the gap, the worse it is, the worse you are playing. On the flip side, when that's a gray gap, that's good. You're getting the better of the chances. And the bigger that gap is, the better you are playing. Now, let's look at the patterns here. So as we see, massive red gap to start the season. The Kraken are getting pretty heavily outchanced. They're getting outplayed. And during that stretch, what's going on? They're racking up points. They are getting wins, or at least getting to overtime. And they are top 10 in the NHL, at least by points percentage. Remember when the Kraken were like 7th in the NHL? That's during that stretch. Makes no sense. But then around December, they kind of get their act together. They are playing a little bit better than their opponents. They're outchancing their opponents. And you have that little gray gap there, and it shows the Kraken are actually doing pretty well. Now, that area right there, that is their massive losing streak. They lose 10 of 11. Makes no sense. And then afterwards, that flips. They go back to playing terribly again. They're giving up more shot quality than they have all season. I mean, look at that, how much they're giving up. They are generating less than they have all season. That's the 4-game win streak. And then last night, you can see it kind of curve back up just a little bit because they have one good game really out of their last 5. And that's the game that they lose. So Dylan, when I go on the Deep Dive podcast, as I am right now, and my job is to analyze this team, what the heck am I supposed to say? What do I say? I mean, to quote the great fictional fashion designer Mugatu, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, Dylan. Yes. Unless you think I'm imagining this or that I've gone off the deep end, because I'm sure at this point from covering this team for a few years, I have lost some marbles. I'm sure I have. This is a phenomenon that has been acknowledged by the head coach himself, Lane Lambert. He said, I think on a question I asked him, he said earlier in the season, there's an irony to the fact that during the team's long losing streak, he felt they were actually playing better than they did when the team was winning games. And you know what? He was right. He was absolutely right about that. This chart shows it clear as day. And so it's not just me seeing this. And that also tells me too, it's not just a result of, analytics models. I know this is an expected goals model here and all that stuff that, the advanced stats, the skeptics will question here. The eye test 100% backs this up. It really does. And it's not just me saying that, it's the coach acknowledging it. And so Dylan, I don't know what to do with this team. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Help me out, Dylan. What do I say? What do I do?
Have we ever known? That's the thing. Certainly this season, I mean, that's why we've been so back and forth with this team all year, right? This is why we were maybe reluctant early on in the season to buy into the whole idea of the team of destiny, right? Because we could tell that they weren't playing that well, and certainly the analytics and all the underlying numbers were saying that this was not sustainable. And sure enough, it was not sustainable. What we weren't expecting was them to turn that around, to start having favorable analytics and then lose a bunch of games. But at the end of the day, like, this is the most hockey graph I've ever seen. This is hockey boiled down to just the numbers, but this is just how the NHL works sometimes. And yeah, it's frustrating and it's hard to figure out. I think if we're upset by it, I can't imagine how Lane Lambert feels and some of the players in that room that are looking at this stuff, because yeah, it's got to be immensely frustrating if pick any player on the roster, Jared McCann. I don't know, he's been injured a lot of the year, but if you're anybody and you feel like the result at the end of the night does not match the effort and the work ethic that you're putting into the game, right? You're doing all the little things right. You make these perfect reads. You're intercepting passes in the neutral zone. You're generating the chances you've been dreaming of generating. You lose the game. You go out there and you're just blowing coverages left and right, and guys are walking past you as a defender, and it doesn't matter because Philip Grubauer makes the big save and your guys get a weird bounce in the offensive zone and you walk out of there winning by a goal. Like, it's got to feel it's got to feel terrible as an athlete that no matter what you're doing out there doesn't seem to be mattering for the end result, because that's what you train your whole life to do, is to put forward certain efforts, make certain plays with the expectation that that determines the win or the loss, and then you're in a situation where it has zero bearing on the end result of the game seemingly.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with it as a player. At least as a player, I guess you can kind of, on balance, I think the Kraken have gotten quite lucky. And so
Yeah.
maybe you just ride with the swings of it and you're like, okay, look, at the end of the day, we've done a little better than we probably should have. We'll take it. But for someone like you or me, Dylan, where and maybe this is a positive of, as much as I miss the post game lives after every game, but of not having to do it every game, like nobody likes it when the Kraken get a win and I have to go out there and be like, look, okay, I'm sorry everybody. They didn't deserve to win this game. They got lucky.
Mhm.
They didn't deserve to win. And on the flip side, nobody likes, when they lost and it's moral victories. Well, look, they played pretty well. They did. Like, well, no, they've lost 10 out of 11. Like no one wants to hear how they've actually been playing well. Like it's just no fun to try and kind of report the truth on this team during
Yeah,
the
no,
wins,
like
during the losses. Like it's frustrating either way.
yes, you are going to have critics no matter what you do. That is certainly a reality we've learned doing this. Um, I think what's interesting though is, and this does match like some of the stuff that we were talking about during these stretches, which was when they were going through that the big losing streak. We noticed that there was a change in style, that they were trying to open things up offensively. They were allowing the games not necessarily to truly turn into a back and forth kind of affair and a more wide open game, but there was a little bit more willingness to play that way from this team. And I think that the chart accurately reflects that, right? I mean, they basically add almost a full extra expected goal per 60 on this chart when there's that massive upswing from the black line there. Like that is them adding an entire extra goal from where they were. That's huge. That's really difficult to do as a team, and I think that it shows that, look, Lane Lambert was recognizing that even though they were in a healthy spot in the standings, the team was not playing a sustainable way, that there were struggles there. Obviously, the team is still the lowest scoring team in the National Hockey League, so there is still some struggle there, but that some adjustments needed to be made, some wrinkles needed to be added to the overall system so that this team could be more consistent offensively and generate more offensively, because they absolutely needed that. Now, I think the downside of that is, as they sacrificed a little bit defensively to try to have that massive upswing in offense. You look at the red line, and the red line does stick with them a little bit. It takes a little bit. There is that positive gap there, but I think that was teams not really knowing what to do yet. And then teams realize what the Kraken are doing, and they're able to match it. And then, both of these two peaks up there are around the same spot. They're at different times, but they're around the same spot. And I think that what you saw was other teams being like, "Okay, they've opened it up a little bit. If we can exploit that and truly turn this into a wide open game, a real back and forth style game, we can try to win this thing." And I think that that's kind of what happened there. It didn't work for any of the California teams because those are the teams that are trying to do it. And you certainly you think back to San Jose game, the Anaheim game, and how many shots Anaheim was trying to get and everything there. You look at the Kings game. I mean, that game was, again, Kings had no idea what to do with all of the opportunities they were given, but they certainly were able to have those wide open opportunities. It was just that the Kraken got some incredible goaltending. They got some incredible goal scoring from Jordan Eberle and what he was able to do during that stretch, and what, Ellie Tolvanen picking things up, Capo Caco coming back in the lineup, all of those things. And so it kind of hid how those teams were performing. But when I look at this chart and I look at the drop off over the California swing, over the win streak here, that the Kraken had, the point streak that they're still on, and I look at a drop that would kill somebody if this was a roller coaster, a graph that could not exist in nature, essentially. I can't help but think that, like, look, it's because other teams started to recognize those differences that the Kraken made, right? We've talked about this so many times. So much of coaching is making adjustments based on what's happening and then making counter adjustments. Other teams are countering what the Kraken were doing. I think Lane Lambert knew he had to back off playing that wide open style, that also was just not how this team was built and not how they were going to find some sustainable success. And I think they're trying to find some equilibrium somewhere in the middle where they can have more shot opportunities than they were getting before, generate more offense than they were at the beginning of the season sustainably without having to completely sacrifice the defensive structure. And I think that that's something that frankly probably takes a full season to figure out as a coach and with a new team and a new roster. And I think that they're just kind of in that. What they have to do though is just try to stay somewhere near the NHL average. Like these massive swings in either direction, I don't think will lead to anything sustainable, positive or negative for them, right? You're going to just end up as streaky as this team has been, where you're either winning everything or you're losing everything, and that at the end of the day well, in theory, most years would not be enough to get it done. Maybe this year it is because the league is so bunched up, but it's certainly going to make things difficult on our end. It's going to make things difficult for Lane Lambert and the players as well, and it might make things difficult on fans during the losing stretches.
Yeah, I mean, especially because look, I think if you're looking at this, one of the takeaways has to be that the effort to open things up a little bit clearly didn't work. And so if you're Lambert, you probably look at this and think, okay, the goal really needs to be to make things as boring as possible. You want things as close to a
Mhm.
0-0 game as they can possibly get, because that's, you've tried it the other way. It doesn't work for you. You need to make the hockey as boring as you possibly can. And I think we've seen that even during the recent win streak that they had, where the Kraken were generating nothing. I mean, it just bottomed out as far as like, we're not going to generate any offensive quality. We'll maybe throw some pucks to the net a little bit more than we were, but we're not going to generate anything of quality. We're just going to try and take away what the opponent's doing. And even then, probably not doing it very well, but you're getting great goaltending. And so I've got stats for days on this sort of thing, but like in the Canucks game, the Kraken scored 2 goals in the first period. I was amazed. They hadn't scored a first period goal in 11 games because they came right out the gate and they will just try and shut things down. Their ideal condition, I think, is 0-0 after the first period. Through all
Yeah.
that winning streak, they had every single game was scoreless after the first period. That's what they want. They want as little to happen early on in the game as possible. And so I looked it up because I was curious. Okay, when's the last time the Kraken scored multiple goals in the first period of a hockey game? Dylan, do you know how many times they have scored multiple goals in the first period of a game all season?
This year,
this
maybe
year.
once, I feel like
Well, they
it
did it
does
against
not
they
feel.
did it against Vancouver, so they did it
Yeah,
last night.
there was that. Yeah, but prior to that game, I mean, there was some early in the year it felt like, but like I can't imagine that many, and certainly none since like it feels like mid-October.
Twice. They've
Yeah,
done it twice all year.
that
You know how many
include
wins they
Vancouver?
have in those 2 games?
None, based on
0.
everything we're talking about.
It was the game last night against Vancouver, and then the 9-4 loss against Edmonton during our
Oh
watch
my
party.
god.
So no, you don't want to come out of the gates and score multiple goals in the first period. No, that's not how you want to play. You don't want to give the fans excitement right off the bat. Absolutely not. No, no, no. You are going to lose games that way. And so I think that's ultimately like what this has got to tell you. You got to lean on if you want to have success, if you are going for it this year in the playoffs. And like, I'm not even just making a joke about this. I mean this. If I was coaching with that goal only, you lean on the veterans as heavily as possible. You don't play the young players. You try and make the games as boring and low event as possible. And you try and eke out 1-0 or 2-1 wins every single night. That's
Yep.
what you have to do. So that has its other downsides, but look, that's kind of where the Kraken are left. If they're going to choose the up direction, that's what it's going to have to look like.
Yeah, no, it does. It's again, it's a weird one. I don't know how else to describe it. It doesn't, it stays weird. You look at the goals per expected goal percentage chart, and it kind of backs up what I was saying as far as just the opportunities for teams, and certainly that the Kraken right now are going back to that boring style where I think they're trying to control possession as much as possible. Yeah, they're still throwing more shots on net than they maybe were at the beginning of the year, but they're very much just trying to make sure that, look, let's not have anything happen. And when things happen, let's just make sure, even if they're low quality, that they're happening from our side. And it's better to take those low quality chances, but limit anything on the other end, and try to just slow the whole game down. But yeah, yeah, I, I don't know. I don't know. It comes back around to what we could have talked about, kind of at the beginning and everything, which is you don't have that one player. You don't have a player that's going to drive this. So you're having to get by as a team, and you're having to get by as a collective. And even still, frankly, right, collectively, you look and you're being led in points by Jordan Eberle with 25 points in 37 games. And I have not looked around the league, but I have to imagine that's probably the lowest point total for somebody who's leading a team in scoring. And Eeli Tolvanen is tied with him at 25. Um, you're still talking about not much higher than a half a point per game player being your leading scorer halfway through the season. And I think when you're talking about that being the guy at the top, then you're talking about, once you get outside, you say your top 2 or 3 scorers, you're talking about a drop off to basically a half point per game from then your next group. And then by the time that you start looking at getting out of the top 10, you're looking at guys in single digit point totals right now. And I just don't think that that's enough to get it done. It's normally not enough to get it done. Obviously, if you can get the goaltending and the defensive structure, you can stretch that and make it go a long way. That's why Lane Lambert was chosen to be your coach in the first place. The organization knew that this was going to be the scenario. But it's one of those things where, again, it just makes the whole thing feel unsustainable. And certainly, if the season was playing out the way most seasons have played out around the National Hockey League, we're not even talking about this team being close to a playoff spot, given just the level of production and performance that they're capable of outputting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. They're at an 86-point pace. In any normal season, we'd be talking about them as not even being close to playoff contention. It's this weird year where every other team is just as bad that's in that race, and maybe some even worse. So it's gonna be a wild ride. And I know we got a comment on our post game last night talking about how maybe even Kraken for third in the Pacific, because there aren't that many good teams. I don't know. I was trying to avoid using this term on the podcast, but like the team of destiny vibes, are they kind of back? Like not in a fun or a pretty way, but just in terms of everybody else being so bad, in terms of everything around you going perfectly.
Well, there's been some aspects of it that I think are playing into it, and, like, they are doing some of the things that the Team of Destiny every year in the National Hockey League does need to do,
The
and
goaltending, like, it's
right,
always
there's
goaltending
goaltending, and I
driven.
think that they were mentioned as part of that same comment on postgame. It's goaltending, it's special teams, right? And you look, they have an above average power play. Power play actually hasn't been that bad. Now it's been kind of re-put back together. The penalty kill is getting better. They've faced some really rough power play units, and that has definitely helped the penalty kill get better. But you know, credit where credit is due. The penalty kill is better than it was. You're up to a well, still not a respectable, but you're at least over 70%. That's
And not
something.
last place figure.
Yes, exactly. And for a while, they're on pace to be the worst penalty kill, like, in league history or in 50 years or something like that. So you're not doing that. Shooting percentage, though, is still low, and, like, this is what I think is gonna ultimately keep them back, and this is what normally the more consistent Team of Destinies are. Say, the Vancouvers of a couple of years ago, where they really just went on that PDO bender, was they had the shooting percentage, and the Kraken don't have the shooting percentage. They're at 9.9% as a whole. 5-on-5 shooting percentage is 7.3. That's really, really low. And I thought this year, when I was trying to be optimistic in the offseason and going into the season and during the early part of the season, the idea was, look, they are due for one of those big shooting percentage years. And if they can get that big shooting percentage, this team can take off. And certainly right now in today's league, right? And I mean literally today, not just like in the modern era. But given the way the standings are and how low the bar is to make the playoffs, if this team was shooting 5-on-5 at 9%, which would be not like above league average is 8.5. But if this team was shooting at 9%, we'd be talking about playoffs almost being guaranteed,
Yeah, which is just wild to think
right?
about.
Like, but you're not even talking about, like, being, like, the best team in the league shooting percentage-wise at 5-on-5. I'm just talking about, like, slightly above average. This team is absolutely locked into a playoff spot given the goaltending they're getting and the defensive structure that they have. But again, I just don't know that they have beyond just a couple guys, they just don't have those kinds of consistent goal scorers that can kind of get you there and get it done unless they're gonna go at an otherworldly clip, right? If Jared McCann was having another 40 goal campaign, that helps you out significantly. But, you know, Jordan Eberle, I guess, is maybe on pace for that a little bit. And could potentially, you know, should get 30 this year if he continues playing the way that he is. But you just don't have that many other guys right now. Chandler Stevenson just got to 10. You only have two double digit goal scorers right now, halfway through the season. It's just you're just missing goal scoring. Like, I don't know how else to phrase it.
Yeah, and again, I think part of it's all by design. You're sacrificing a lot of numbers so that you can get Philip Grubauer to a 917 save percentage, and have that goaltending. Like it's all by design. And I think the other thing too is like it's all designed also to kind of just take talent out of it. Like, I mean, I have
Yeah.
stats for days. Like I said, the Kraken, look at the record without Brandon Montour. Like this winning streak is without Brandon Montour. Like they're better without him than they are with him from a wins and loss perspective. And that's your best player. Like none of that makes any sense. Without Jared McCann, they've actually been all right, surprisingly good. The recent win streak again without Jaden Schwartz, like it doesn't really make sense on paper, but I think it's the entire system. It's designed to take skill out of the equation completely. And given the makeup of this team, that's a good thing. But it does end up looking like this.
It looks rough. It looks rough. So we'll see how things play out. Another week, another handful of games, and who knows what kind of conversation we're gonna have to have with this group. Next Monday, right? It's just one of those teams where it seems like it can all change on a week to week basis, and we'll see kind of what direction they do. If they decide to play poorly and win, or if they decide to play well and lose. That
Those
that
are the
is
only two options this
that,
year. That's been
yes.
it. Yeah.
They have put themselves in a spot where that is what they've created. So we'll see. Let us know in the comments which you prefer watching? Do you prefer watching your team dominate and walk out of there with no points or maybe a loss in a shootout, or do you prefer watching really bad hockey from your team? But hey, all that matters is that you're in a playoff spot.
Let us know.
I'm genuinely curious because it would be hard for me to figure out which one I would prefer. That's for sure. It's a tough call to make. But that's gonna do it for this episode of the deep dive. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank one more time the law offices of Rico Tessendorf for sponsoring the podcast as he does each and every week. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Stay safe through the rest of the holiday season, everybody, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.